The coffee maker finished its cycle at 6:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with the lights off, listening to the house breathe around me the way old houses do when everyone else is sleeping. My wife was upstairs, at least I believe she was. That was the last morning I would believe anything without checking first. Her name is Carol. We had been married for 31 years. She taught 3rd grade for 22 of those years, and when she retired 4 years ago, I thought we would finally have the time we had always postponed. Road trips, morning walks, maybe a vegetable garden she always said she wanted. What we had instead was a quiet house and 2 people who had forgotten how to fill silence with anything but routine. I am 63 years old. I worked as a structural engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio for 34 years. I retired 14 months before this story begins. I am telling you all of this so you understand that I am not a dramatic man. I do not exaggerate. I measure twice and cut once. I have done this my entire life with wood, with steel, with words. What happened is not something I have exaggerated. I wish it were. My younger sister, Diane, is a flight attendant for a regional airline out of Cleveland. She has worked that job for 19 years. She knows airports and terminals the way I know load calculations, automatically without having to think. She notices things other people walk past. She has always been that way, even as a child. Our mother used to say Diane was born paying attention. On a Tuesday in late October, Diane was working a morning departure out of Columbus. She had an overnight layover and was walking through the terminal at Port Columbus at roughly 7:15 in the morning when she stopped at a coffee kiosk near Gate B12. She told me later she almost didn't call. She thought maybe she was wrong. She stood there for almost 2 minutes, watching before she picked up her phone. I was at home. Carol had already left for what she called her Tuesday walk with her friend Beverly from her old school. She went every Tuesday at 7. She had been doing it for about 3 months. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Diane's name appeared on the screen. I answered because Diane almost never called before 9. We are both early risers, but we have an unspoken agreement that mornings belong to each of us separately. She said, "Are you alone right now?" I said I was. She said, "Is Carol with you?" I said no, that Carol was on her walk. There was a silence on her end that lasted long enough to make my chest tighten. I have known my sister for 61 years. I know every texture of her silence. This one was the kind she uses when she is trying to decide how much to say. She said, "I'm looking at a woman who looks exactly like Carol, and she is standing at the gate for the 740 to Atlanta, with a man I do not recognize." I did not say anything. She said, "I could be wrong. I haven't seen her up close, but the hair is the same. The coat, that gray wool coat she wore to your retirement dinner. I'm almost sure that's the same coat." I asked her to keep watching and not approach. I asked her to call me back. Then I sat down on the kitchen stool and put both hands flat on the counter and breathed. Carol and I had bought that gray coat together at a department store in November 2 years ago. It was her idea. She had tried on 4 coats before choosing it. I remembered sitting in one of those chairs they put out for husbands and telling her the gray one looked the best. She had agreed. We drove home in the rain and she wore it into the house without taking it off, saying she wanted to break it in. There is only one gray wool coat. My phone buzzed again 8 minutes later. Diane said, "They just boarded." She went through with a carry-on bag. The man checked a bag. It went under. They were close together, not like friends, like people who don't need to think about how close they're standing. I thanked her. I told her I would handle it. She started to say something else, and I told her I would call her later, and I ended the call. I sat in the kitchen for a while. The refrigerator made its usual sound. The furnace clicked on. Outside, a neighbor backed out of a driveway. I did not panic. This is not because I'm a strong man or a cold man. It is because 34 years of engineering teaches you that when something fails unexpectedly, the worst thing you can do is react before you understand the structure of the failure. I needed to understand the structure. Carol came home at 9:47. I know because I was watching the clock by then. She came through the garage door with her walking shoes on and her cheeks slightly flushed the way they get after she actually exercises. She was wearing her navy fleece, not the gray wool coat. She poured herself a glass of water and asked if I wanted more coffee. I said, sure. She poured it. She set it next to me. She asked if I had eaten breakfast, and I said I had some toast. She nodded and took her glass to the living room and turned on the morning news. I sat with my coffee, and I thought about the gray wool coat, which I had not seen hanging by the door. That afternoon, while Carol was in the other room on the phone with her sister in Phoenix, I walked upstairs to the bedroom closet. The closet is deep and narrow, and Carol's half is more organized than mine has ever been. Winter coats hang at the far left. The gray wool coat was there, hanging in its usual place, facing outward the way she always hangs it. I stood looking at it for a moment. Then I checked the label. Her initials were on the tag inside the collar, CMB, written in the black permanent marker she uses to mark her things. They were there. So either Diane had been wrong, or there were two coats. I did not believe Diane had been wrong. That evening, I did something I am not proud of, but I would do again without hesitation. I went to our shared bank account and looked at the past 6 months of statements on my laptop, in the office with the door half closed, while Carol watched television downstairs. What I found was not dramatic in the way I expected. There were no huge withdrawals, no jewelry purchases or hotel charges that jumped out. What there was instead was something subtler and, I realized, much more deliberate, a pattern of cash withdrawals, every one of them at or just below $300, spaced roughly 10 to 12 days apart. Over 6 months, the total was just under $5,000. $5,000 in cash, removed in amount small enough not to trigger any notification we had set up on the account. I had set those notifications up myself 2 years ago after a fraud alert. I had set the threshold at $350. I had told Carol about it at the time. She had listened and nodded. She had known exactly where the line was. I closed the laptop and went downstairs and sat next to her on the couch and watched television for an hour. She leaned her head on my shoulder at one point, the way she sometimes does. I did not move. The following Tuesday, I told Carol I had a doctor's appointment at 8 in the morning. A follow-up for my blood pressure medication, I said. She nodded and said to tell her how it went. I left the house at 7:15. I drove to the end of our street, turned around, and parked 2 houses down, with a clear line of sight to our driveway. At 7:22, Carol came out of the garage. She was wearing the gray wool coat. She put a small rolling carry-on bag into the trunk of her car. She drove away. I followed her to the airport. She parked in the long-term lot. I parked 3 rows over and followed on foot, staying well behind, using other travelers as cover the way you do in large spaces when you don't want to be seen. She moved through the terminal quickly and confidently. She knew where she was going. She had done this before. I watched her meet a man near the check-in area. He was around 60, silver-haired and wearing a dark jacket. They did not kiss or embrace in a way that would have been obvious, but she handed him something, an envelope, and he put it in his jacket pocket, and then they stood together in line with the familiarity of two people who had shared this kind of morning before. I took photographs on my phone. Steady, clear, unhurried. I had charged the phone fully the night before. I did not approach her. I walked back to my car and drove home. That afternoon, I called my son, who lives in Pittsburgh. He is 34 and works in finance, and, more to the point, he has a very good attorney who he used during his own divorce 3 years ago. My son's name is not important here. What is important is that he answered, and I told him everything, and he did not say a single unnecessary word until I had finished. Then he said, "Dad, don't move any money yet. Don't confront her yet. Let me call Marcus." Marcus is the attorney. I want to explain something about this period of time because I have thought about it often since. Living in a house with someone when you know what you know and they don't know that you know. It is not like anything else I have experienced. It is not dramatic the way it sounds. It is quiet. It is ordinary, which is the strangest part. We made dinner together on Wednesday. She told me a story about her friend Beverly's new grandchild. I listened and asked the right questions. We watched the news. We went to bed. I thought about 31 years. I thought about the gray wool coat. I thought about those neat little withdrawals, all of them just under the threshold, over and over for 6 months. I thought about the fact that she had told me the Beverly walks were on Tuesdays only, but I'd found a charge in the statements, a parking charge in the long-term lot, from a Thursday in September that I hadn't thought about at the time. I thought about it now. The following week, I had a conversation with Marcus by phone. He told me several things. He told me that Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, which means adultery, while relevant, is not the primary lever. He told me that financial misconduct, systematic, deliberate withdrawal of marital funds, is documented and provable and very relevant to asset division. He told me to keep documenting. He told me not to close or transfer any accounts, not to alert her in any way, and to keep a private written record with dates and specifics. I bought a small notebook at a drugstore. I paid cash. I kept it in the car, in the pocket of the door on the driver's side. Over the next 3 weeks, I documented 4 more things. The first was another Tuesday departure I verified through the airline's public flight tracker after following her again. The second was a telephone number that appeared repeatedly in Carol's recent calls on our shared phone plan. I had access to the bill, listed under a contact name I didn't recognize. The third was a storage unit I found a key for in the lining of her winter bag, a key I photographed but returned exactly where I found it. The fourth was a conversation I overheard by accident. Or perhaps not entirely by accident, since I'd begun paying attention to the sound of her voice in other rooms, in which she said quietly to someone on her cell phone the words, "He doesn't notice anything. He never has." I wrote that down too. The time, the date, the words as close to exact as I could recall them. I want to be careful about what I say next, because I have no interest in making myself the wronged hero of a story that is more complicated than that. 31 years is a long time. I know I was not an easy man to live with in the way that some men are easy. I was distracted for long stretches. I worked long hours and then came home and worked some more. I missed things I should not have missed. There were years when we were more like two people managing a household than two people in a marriage. I am not pretending that is not true, but I also did not steal from us. I did not build a parallel life. I did not learn the exact threshold of our fraud notification and stay carefully below it for 6 months. Whatever I failed at in 31 years, I did not do those things. That distinction matters to me. On the second Saturday of November, I asked Carol if we could have dinner at home instead of going out the way we sometimes do on Saturdays. I told her I would cook. She seemed pleased. She likes it when I cook, or she used to, or she performed liking it. I'm not sure anymore which one it was. I made pasta. I opened a bottle of wine we had been keeping for no particular reason. I set the table properly, the way we rarely did anymore except for holidays. We ate. She talked about a book she was reading. I listened. After dinner, when she was clearing the table, I told her I needed to show her something. I had printed the bank statements. I had printed the photographs from the airport. I had written a single page of the key dates and facts from my notebook, clear and specific, the way I would write up findings in an engineering report. I set them on the table in front of her. She looked at them for a long time without speaking. She did not deny the photographs. She did not offer an explanation for the cash. She sat very still. Then she said, "How long have you known?" I told her. I said, "Since the last Tuesday of October." She was quiet again. Then she said, "I didn't think you were paying attention." I told her that was something I was going to have to think about for a long time. She asked what I wanted to do. I told her I had already spoken to an attorney. I told her I was not interested in a scene or an argument, or any of the things that some people need in this situation. I told her I had a second set of those documents in a place she wouldn't find them, and that Marcus had copies as well. I told her the storage unit key was something she should think about. Her face changed slightly when I mentioned the storage unit, just slightly. I told her she had until the end of the month to decide how she wanted to approach this, and that I recommended she get her own attorney, and that I was going to the guest room, and that breakfast tomorrow would be like any other breakfast because I was 63 years old and I had no interest in drama. Then I picked up my wine glass and walked to the living room and sat in my usual chair and turned on the news. I do not know what she did in the kitchen after that. I did not go back to see. The divorce took 7 months. The storage unit contained, among other things, approximately $18,000 in cash, a second cell phone, and documentation of a relationship that had been ongoing for just over 2 years. Marcus used all of it. The financial misconduct was provable and detailed. The settlement reflected that. I did not ask for details about the man at the airport. I decided early on that those details were not mine to need. Diane called me when it was finalized. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was. I told her I had been sleeping better than I had in years, which was true, and which surprised me when I first noticed it. She said, "I almost didn't call you that morning. I stood there for 2 minutes talking myself out of it." I told her I was glad she had called. She said, "You should have seen your face at Thanksgiving. You seemed lighter." I thought about that word for a while after we hung up, lighter. I have thought about it often since. There is a specific kind of weight that comes from a life that has slowly become something you do not recognize. It arrives gradually, which is why you don't notice it adding up. You accommodate it. You adjust your posture around it. You tell yourself this is simply what long marriages feel like, that the distance is normal, that the silence is companionable when it isn't. And then one morning, your sister calls from a gate at the airport, and something shifts. I do not live in the same house anymore. I bought a smaller place on the east side, near the river, with a yard that gets good light in the morning. I planted a vegetable garden last spring. It did not go especially well, but it did not fail entirely either, which I'm choosing to count as success. My coffee maker finishes its cycle at 6 in the morning. I sit at the kitchen table with the lights on now. I notice everything,